Okay, so we're in the Unity Hub and we're in our projects area. We definitely need to make sure that we have an editor version installed. So if you notice, I have 2022.3. You might have a different version, it might be Unity 6. Either way, we need an editor version. When we go to our projects, we can come here and you'll notice I have a lot of projects already. You'll come here and you're going to select new project. Now, some things are going to load up here. What we're going to start with, though, is right here. So if you select learning, you're going to see this option for FPS microgame. This is a demo game that is already pre-built that allows us to kind of test and see how a real professional game is made. And we're going to basically dissect this game from the inside out. So you can give it a name. I'm just going to name it FPS microgame. And I already have this project, but you're going to go ahead and you're going to go down here and say create project once you give it a name. Once you get into your project, um, essentially you got a game right here. This is the game view. And what we're going to do is use some of these tutorials so that we can familiarize ourselves with this editor. So I'm going to do that, okay? We're just going to come up here to tutorials. If you don't have this tutorials thing right here, what you're going to do is you want to just come up here to the top of your screen and go show tutorials. And that should show your tutorial. All right. So I'm going to select the first one, get started. So I'm going to select that. You'll notice our tutorial is starting. So in this tutorial, you'll begin to explore the basics of the Unity editor as you playtest the beginning of the game and review the Unity editor interface. And then we're also going to make the player character jump higher. So let's start. I'm going to click start, and you notice it highlights this. So this is play mode. You can select play mode in the toolbar at the top of this layout. And then there's also going to be the scene view in the center of this layout. That's scene. But either way, when you enter play mode, the scene view changes into your game view for testing. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit play. All right, now we have to eliminate all enemies. Now, we're still in our game. If we want to exit the game, we just have to go up here and hit play again. So if I hit that again, it'll basically stop our game. Okay, now we're going to dive into our game a little deeper. And everything essentially in our game world, including the player character, is called a game object. The hierarchy right here, this hierarchy, this is where you organize game objects. So each one in your game is listed there. Every single thing that is in your game is right here, and it's a game object. So I'm going to go ahead and select player. That's the game object we selected. And essentially, when you select a game object in the hierarchy, you're going to see a list of all its components right here in the inspector. So components, they contain properties that give a game object specific functionalities. So, for example, the player character controller properties are what make the player character move in response to player input. If you go down, scroll down, we have a player character controller component. Keep going down, we even have a health component. We have a weapons manager. We have a jetpack script. I don't even know what that does yet. Character controller. We have many things attached to this player. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take the gravity property in here and we're just going to set it and change it. So if I go to, let's see, right here, we have the gravity down force property, and this controls how high the player can jump. So what we want to do is it wants us to change it to 12. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say 12, and that's it. I changed it to 12. Now if I play my game again, you're going to notice that I'll be able to jump higher. I can jump much higher than I did before. All right. Perfect. So we're done with that. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a room. So we'll go through this tutorial. All right, in this tutorial, you'll build out your game by adding a new room for the player to explore. Let's start. Okay, so this is the view tool. So you can adjust your view so that it's easier to see what you're creating. The view tool lets you navigate in the scene view. So I'll click it. And now you'll notice if I click down on my mouse, I can pan around the scene view. Very cool. If I use my scroll wheel on my mouse, I can zoom in and out as well. All right, now it's telling me that I can orbit. So if I want to get a 360 view from a single pivot point by orbiting around within the scene view, all I have to do is hold Alt and then use my mouse. So if I don't hold Alt, I just do this. But if I hold Alt, then it does that. So just know that that functionality exists. All right. To zoom in, we can go with our scroll wheel like I showed you earlier, or you can hold Alt and then hold the right mouse button and you can move it like this and you'll zoom in and out. Whichever one is easier for you. Okay, now what we want to do is talk about the project window. So the project window is where you can find all the files used in your Unity project. Assets are the files that make up your project, such as a prefab, or a game object, or textures, or audio. And basically, it works like a file explorer and it's organized into folders. So in the instructions it says drag in the Room Ultra prefab. Click and drag the Room Ultra prefab from the project window onto the floor in the scene view. Okay, so it wants me to find the Room Ultra prefab. So I'm going to just look here. Here's my assets, FPS. Let's see, prefabs, level, rooms. Here's a room. And this is the Room Ultra prefab. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move my scene like this a little bit. And I'm going to drag in this room. I literally dragged it in. Okay, so that's the room altar that I brought in there. Now we can use the move tool to adjust these settings. So I'm going to select this little move tool. And you'll notice I can move it around if I want. Remember our controls so we can see better. I'm going to oh, by the way, I also did this by holding down my middle button. So anyways, I'm going to adjust these settings like this. Okay, move this down. All right, so I have another room right there. So that's basically a game object. So if you select the cube at the intersection of the arrows, you can freely move the game object on multiple planes at once. So if I grab this cube here, I can move it on many different planes like this at once. So just be aware that that exists. Okay. Now, after we do this, after adding a new room, you must update the nav mesh surface, which represents the walkable area of your game. So the new room altered game object adds new walkable surface to the nav mesh that you must bake into the existing nav mesh surface. So it wants us to select the nav mesh surface, and then select bake. And that's it. So we just added to our map. Okay, now let's talk about colors. So if we want to change colors, we'll go through this tutorial. You can basically use materials to change colors of game objects. And that's what we're going to learn. So you can find materials in the assets folder of the project window in the art folder. So I'm going to go ahead and select FPS, art, materials, and it wants us to find floor gray. So let's find that. Maybe in level. Yeah. Floor gray, right here. I changed the color earlier, but that's why it's not gray anymore. But you click on that floor gray material, and you can use the base map to change it to any color you want. Now it's called gray, so we probably would want to keep it gray, but you could create another material and call it player. And if it was called player, then you know, oh, I can update this to whatever color I want. I'm going to make it red. All right, I like that. Hit next and done. And you know what? We can actually see the update here. If you look, our floor is right here, I'm pretty sure. So if I update the color, look at that. The floor is changing with that color update. Okay, now we're going to add an enemy bot. Let's go through that. So in this tutorial, you're going to add an enemy bot to make your game more challenging. Let's do it. All right, so the first step to creating an enemy is to add a new prefab. So let's add a hoverbot. Prefabs are templates for game objects with preset components. So just remember, anytime you hear the word prefab, it's a game object that we have components already set on them. So they're stored as basically assets that you can simply drag into the scene view. If you're still not understanding what the word prefab means, understand that remember when we added a new room? Essentially, we dragged it from our project folders into the scene. That's a prefab. We took some object that was already pre-configured and dragged it into our scene. So it wants us to do that. We're going to go ahead and find the enemy hoverbot and drag it into the scene. So let's find it. Enemies. Nope, these are materials. So we want to go to, and we're in art. We don't want art. Let's go to our normal FPS folder. We'll click prefabs, enemies, enemy hoverbot. We'll drag and drop them right there. Perfect. Okay, now that we dragged him in there, we'll just make sure that the select move tool here is selected, the move tool selected. So let me click that again. All right, we can move them around wherever we want. We can make them really high. We can move around in our scene again. Remember to do that. I just held down the middle mouse button. Hold Alt and the mouse, and normally I can orbit around. I don't know why I can't. But anyways, if I want to zoom in, I can just press the F key. F as in Frank. And I can scroll in and out. Anyways, I have my new bot in there. Great. All right, now, we selected our little enemy guy here. and we already repositioned him. Similarly, not only can you reposition, but you can also rotate them. So we'll select the rotate tool right here. And now you're going to notice, you might see it better if I move out, but now we can actually rotate our guy. We can rotate him, right? We can scale him if we come here. Look at this. This is the scale tool. So I'll select scale. We can make him wide on that axis, wide on that axis. Let me scroll in a little bit. Wide on this axis. So we can make him really big. We can make him even, really giant if you wanted to. Just know that that option is available. If you ever have to undo something, you can do Control Z, just so you know. Okay. So we rotated him and we scaled him. And that's it for that. All right. Now, when you're on your own, outside of class or in class, you can always come in here and see what things are by selecting them. So remember, this is your hierarchy. Here's your player. I'm going to select the player. When I double click it, it brings me there. What else do we have here? Enemy turret. Okay, let me click him. Whoa, he brings me there. Okay. Enemy hoverbot. Brings me there. All right, cool. So we have all these things in our game that we can manipulate. And you'll notice every time we click on something, it shows us everything related to that game object. Let's see. If I say pick up health, if I double click it, you'll notice it brings me to this little object here. What's on our object? Well, let's see. It says health pickup script. Okay. So we have some sort of script or code, and that is going to be the next lesson. Scripts essentially are C# code that C# code files that we can attach to these game objects. So if I wanted to create a script or something and call it, for example, like this one, Jetpack. This is essentially a file or code that we can attach to our player. And anything attached to our player will always run. So we'll do that in the next lesson.